So the project started quite by chance. I was looking at Judith Wright's The Coral Battleground, and in it she credits a journalist, Barry Wain, with his faithful coverage. He was then the Brisbane correspondent for The Australian, for bringing the Save the Reef campaign of the 1960s to the public. And so I was madly Googling Barry Wain to see where he was and where he'd ended up. He had passed, but I happened to find an article that had been published in these US regional newspapers like the Kansas Times and the Ohio Observer, and it was about this woman, Kerrie Ridgway, who he was referring to as a girl, Robinson Crusoe, who'd left her typing pool job in Bjelke-Petersen's Queensland to live on her own on Northwest Island in the southern regions of the reef and think and study fish. And I thought, well, who is this woman? And then that led to that other question, which is, who are other women of the reef? What's really interesting about that now, and thanks to the John Oxley Library Fellowship, I actually got to speak to Kerrie Ridgway, and the story that she tells about that newspaper article is quite distinctive. She speaks about being on Northwest Island and waking up to a camera in her face, and the distress that caused her, and those newspaper articles leading to large bags of mail arriving from American, a lot of them Vietnam soldiers who were in Vietnam, in the 60s, 70s, with many a decent and not so decent proposal for her. So it drew attention to this. She just wanted to think and study fish. And then she was dealing with all this, she became like a tourist attraction, and she had to leave the island and did eventually sail off on a boat with an American research scientist who was there at the time. But you can see the distinction in those stories, you know, what you might read in the newspaper about this interesting girl, Robinson Crusoe, and what the story that girl, Robinson Crusoe, who does not want to be called that ever, would tell about that particular incident. And I guess that story epitomises why women of the Great Barrier Reef and this particular project is so important, because it gives women an opportunity to tell that story of their contribution in their own words, in their own voices, and bring their perspectives on why the Great Barrier Reef is important and what they've managed to do in that space.